Save yourself some money next spring and improve your soil health naturally with Soil Biotics Soil Boost. This is a dry, raw humic product that is broadcast post-harvest. Soil Boost will work for you throughout the winter months to create a looser soil and improve water infiltration and retention. Soil Boost helps to balance soil pH levels and increase nutrient retention so fewer inputs are needed. Soil Biotics is offering a special fall discount program for Soil Boost from October 1st through the end of November. Don't miss this once-a-year special that will pay benefits all next season. Call the office at 815-929-1752 or inquire at soilbiotics.com. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds. You're listening to Rooted in Organic podcast, and I'm Brian Wood. And today, along with Mike Klein, we're sitting down with Stefan Sobkowiak, who's from Montreal, Canada. He's a permaculture orchardist, and so this is a new, we've never had an orchard grower. We've had other citrus and banana growers on, and sounds like you've got a really cool story about growing many different varieties in the same area and wanted to sit down and have a conversation. But before we get into that, can you give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, how you got into farming, and some of your interest in it?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I actually kind of stumbled on this. It was never in the plans. I had studied, went to university, studied biology, did a master's in animal behavior, studying mixed species flocks and predation. I mean, that was completely away from what I'm doing now. Realized as a biologist in training and working in that, I did not want to study the decline of species or document the decline. That was like, that's not exciting. I don't want to, hey, we're declining the species. No, I wanted to increase wildlife. I wanted to increase the amount of diversity and biodiversity everywhere. So that was like, I guess I won't do it as a biologist. So I retrained as a landscape architect, did a master's in landscape architecture, and figuring, you know what, the ones who design and plan the landscape are probably more the ones who can affect that change. So I married the two. I did my master's focusing on increasing or decreasing wildlife in urban and suburban areas. That was my thesis. Did that, had an office for several years, and realized this is not exactly what I wanted to do, because I loved being outside. And I loved being around animals. I loved being in nature. I just had to be outside and doing designs. I realized for every 2 hours that I would spend outside, I'd spend 40 hours in an office drawing up the design. Yeah. And after a few years, I was going crazy. I just thought, I can't do this. I can't continue being away from what I loved the most, which is being outdoors. And so just to get a dose of being outside, we decided, let's look around and buy a property that we can do something outside. I just needed my dose of outdoors. Mm-hmm. And so we looked around for 2 years, bought a small farm, 12 acres. That was at the time a 4,000 tree monoculture conventional apple orchard. So that's what we started with. Lessons learned along the way, but we converted immediately to organic the very first, like right away we started the 3-year transition. We're certified for about 5 years and came to the realization that a monoculture organic orchard to me was not a functioning ecosystem. That was it was a kind of hard pill to swallow, but I had tried in those from 92 to 2000, 2002, I tried all kinds of things. So to diversify from grass, trees, we added the whole animal component in between. So we had 100 sheep in the orchard. We tried with 200 turkeys. We tried raising chickens, laying hens, broilers, pheasant, guinea fowl, quail. I mean, just tried all kinds. And because I had studied mixed species flocks, I even integrated. And this was what, I was trying this, try that. And I realized, wow, mixing the flocks is so much easier. You put the fence around or you put the pens and you put all the species in there. So we tried first in pens like Salatin. I went to visit Salatin and realized, well, a pen is good if you're on farm and you're there all the time and you can, but we don't live on the farm. We're an hour away from the farm. So for those people who are listening who think, I'm commuting to work, I definitely don't live on the farm. Or maybe you live on the farm and you commute to work. But I found there was a big advantage at not living on the farm. Most people think, well, if you're going to farm, you want to live on the farm.
Yep.
But the advantage is that when I close the gate, because we have a gate to keep the deer out, when I close the gate, I'm leaving. It's like going to work. Hopefully, if you have a job that when you're done the day, you're done the day. But for me, that was it. And it's the mental space that was so valuable. That whatever you've gone through, and I mean, let me tell you, I've gone through enough tough days where nothing's working. And usually they always come in groups. So you go to start the tractor and doesn't start. Okay, so you go to pick up a tool and, I don't know where that tool was put. And, you go to fix and the tools break. And I mean, it's just compounds. And I even I have a YouTube channel now, and I did a video one time that I called, I Want to Quit. And I just filmed myself at one of those tough days. And it was raw. I mean, it was raw. I was almost crying because when you hit a day where everything's piled on, I think that morning I woke up, something came in and we lost 20 birds. Okay. And then it just snowballed bad to worse to worse. And then it was like, I just want to quit. I just want to, I would so many times, if somebody had come to the gate and said, were you looking to sell? No, I'm not looking to sell. Here's the keys. I'll give this place to you. Please take it. I don't want to do this anymore. That's normal. Plus, I went in such a frontier. I was certainly, you could consider pioneers where, I'm the one facing, the arrows and everything else, because it was just, I could not turn around to a neighbor and say, hey, how do you do? It was enough that I was glad I had a fence and a gate because I did not need all the negative reinforcing of, this is crazy, this won't work. If you stop to listen, I'd never go to a coffee shop because all you'll hear is the negative. And farmers on average, I find that very disappointing how often the negative predominates. The weather is what it is. What are you going to do about the weather? Talk about it? That won't help. It really won't. So you should grow, and that's what happened. The journey allowed me to grow. You have to grow to the point where, look, whatever happens, happens. And I go through I teach this, I've taught now on 3 continents, and part of the course is I have people imagine the worst day. What's the absolute word? I mean, pile on every disaster you could go through, whatever you want. If you're in an area, we're not really in a hurricane area or a tornado area. But imagine, tornado comes through, wipes everything. You're left with bare soil. Okay, now what do you do? I mean, and it's a very good experience to imagine the worst. Because what you find is all those bad days compared to the worst that can happen. You go, you know what? I've imagined the worst, and yeah, this sucks. But it's not that bad, really. It's a day thing, or it's a week thing, or even a year thing. This year absolutely sucked. This year for us was amazing, like record production on everything. So you will have amazing years, and you'll have years that you just want to forget. So having that distance, as I was saying with the, closing the gate, it really helps, because even the drive, I mean, people listen to podcasts, that drive is so valuable. It's so useful because you get somebody's perspective. I call it sparks. You'll pick on one thing. You heard something and it doesn't leave you. When you hear something and it's like, I'm trying to forget what I heard, but I can't forget it. It's bugging you. It just keeps nudging at you, and you go, you know what? I heard that, and for the last week, I can't shake that thought. Well, if that happens, that's another world that you're not usually plugged into or aware of that is trying to nudge you in a direction. Mm-hmm. Like, go my story 10 years ahead while we were organic. One of the things that made us change from organic to go to a permaculture orchard was we had a caterpillar. And this caterpillar, it's a tent caterpillar. It's a group-forming caterpillar. There'll be about 200, 250 caterpillars in one tent or in one...
The web?
Yes.
Okay, because we have those around here, especially on walnut trees, and they'll actually kill trees. That the same one?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a different species.
Okay.
It's same type.
Type.
They work the same way, because there's a walnut one that's found on walnuts. The one we have is found usually on apple and cherry. But it forms those tents. You'll have a whole mass of them. We used to get, it was normal in the organic years to find, because for me, I did not even want to spray an insecticide, even though I could. I was certified. I could spray certain things, rotenone, but I didn't want to. I always went, I read an amazing book called The Soil and Health and the Agricultural Testament by Sir Albert Howard. And that is so many people started organic because of that book. Because the foundations he lays and the principles he puts out are so classic. I mean, it's a classic book. Get it, because I think I've read it now 6 or 7 times. I need to try to reread it every 5 years. And he has one thing in there, and among several, but he says pests and disease, and you can include weeds, are not the problem. They are pointing to the problem. So the real root of why you have this insect or this disease or this weed infestation, there is a reason. It's not the weed. You can spray it. You can spray the insect. That won't solve the problem. They are a symptom of the problem. And so I was chewing on that, and that one sentence I just said, the pests and disease are not the problem. They're pointing to a problem, where he also says where insects are disease should be regarded as our professors sent free by Mother Nature to get our house in order. That's his quote.
Wow.
They're our professors. Hey, they're here to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I remember reading that book and facing this caterpillar. And, you're at a crossroads, and life is full of these Ys in the road. And I was like, okay, I could spend time learning what to apply, learning what to spray, learning what to... it takes time. I mean, you don't just go, okay, I'm going to spray. You have to learn, you have to equip. And I was like, I don't want to go that route. I just don't know. Maybe my biologist background, I could not jive farming and killing as a standard practice. It was like, Doesn't matter that it's organic, and I can, but I don't want to. So finally, they'd be in peaks and cycles, these caterpillars, and after about, they were usually every 3 years. And one year we had it particularly bad, and they do repeat, usually on about a 30-year cycle. They're really, like, they build up every peak, and then that 30-year peak is, like you say, can be devastating. And that year, I remember looking at the trees, and when you get in a row, and that was one of the big clues, but you get in a row and it's all apple trees, so 1,000 trees, thousands of trees, but they're all in a row, and this caterpillar just comes in somewhere, and there might be 3 or 5 egg masses. They hatch, and they just start eating. They just eat. And when you have 3 nests in a dwarf apple tree, it doesn't take that long to finish that tree off. And then it's like, okay, we're done with this one. What's next? Next one, next one, next one. And so I'd walk through the orchard, and there'd be these patches of 10, 12, 15 trees that in June, which should be the peak solar collecting period with maximum leaf surface, they look like it's January. There's not a leaf, not even a stem of a leaf left. They're completely defoliated. I mean, when there's that many, they just look around till everything's gone, and then they just catch the next branch and go to the next tree. And they go tree to tree to tree because the trees touch. So it's easy to move from one tree to the next. And I remember that one year where it's like, it was such a down that I did a quick survey counting, and I figured there's got to be 1,000 nests in the orchard. It's like, there's no way. Because in the past, I could go and cut off the nest, and I'd burn them. But when it's like 1,000 nests, and most of them are, I have to use a ladder, they're beyond reach. And so it's like just logistically impossible. I can't do this. Even if I start, by the time I'm done, those are already, they're already caterpillared out, and they're going to be moths to start another cycle. And I nature will humble you sometimes. If you're willing to be humbled, and anybody listening, I'd say, be in a position or be in an attitude that you're willing to be humbled, because it's not fun if nature humbles you. I've heard so many stories of farmers who just drop to their knees in a field. It's like, I give up. Like, this is disaster. And that's what unfortunately, that's because usually as men, we know, I can do it. We're going to work through it, and we'll figure it out. And women, fortunately, they don't take directly that attitude, and they are willing to be more humble. And that's a good thing, because when you're humbled, and that caterpillar absolutely humbled me, and I just said, okay, I'm looking at one of these tents, and I said, you win. You win. I give up. I've been, I don't know what to do. Like, the book tells me, and not the Bible in that sense, but in Sir Albert Howard's book, he says, you are supposed to be my professor. What are you supposed to teach me? And then it comes as clear as day. You've created a buffet. It's like, what? Who says that? Who's saying that? Is it my head? Is it the caterpillar? Well, I mean, in the Bible, the donkey spoke, right? And sure, animals can speak. We just not usually hearing it. But to me, it's like, yes, this caterpillar told me exactly what was the problem. I mean, 3 words, or 4. You've created a buffet. A buffet. Yeah, you go to a buffet, the table's set, there's all this food. I mean, it's so much. Well, for them, that's what it was. The orchard was this huge table set, and like, it's easy. You just go from one plate to another and just eat all you want. And so that kind of confirmed what I was sort of suspecting, that, the organic monoculture apple orchard does not function as an ecosystem. It works if you want to put all the inputs. It'll work if you want to put all the work to get it to work. But it's not a self-sustaining system that if I went away for a year, 2 years, it just got better. No, not at all. Like, it does not. And so I had been teaching permaculture. I learned permaculture in 1990. I discovered it. And so I had been teaching permaculture, PDCs, and And it was like, yeah, this is how you should have an orchard, but this is my orchard, and it's not at all like this. You know, I was teaching what I knew it should be, but what I had was a monoculture organic orchard. And so, fortunately, at that time, I was teaching at a university, and one of my students, he really wanted to work with me. He said, you know, I want to have an orchard, and I want to work with you, because even though I had an organic, nobody had a permaculture orchard. So it was like, this is the closest to what I want to do. And so I said, okay. I said, here's the deal. You want to work with me? We'll start a nursery. I'll supply the area. I'll supply the plants and the tools and anything we need. And you do, actually, we did most of the work together, because it was just enjoyable to finally work with somebody, because most of the time I'd been working alone at the farm. And so we started this nursery when the time was ready. We had adventures in that, because when the nursery was ready to replant the first time, after the trees were 2 years old, we had voles come in. And I can remember in March, as the snow, we get snow, like in the nursery would be 3 feet of snow all winter, and that's from like early December till end of March. And I remember in March, as the snow started to melt, I thought, oh, this doesn't look good. The top, whatever was covered, it was outside the snow, looked fine. So the tops of the trees were nice and, barked. But as soon as the snow went down about 6 inches, because that's what voles do, is they tunnel in the snow. And if they find a good food patch, they're just going to move around under the snow in tunnels. And so they'd start eating, and it was like, the bark is all white here below the 6 inches. And then it's like, as it's melting more and more trees. And I mean, it was complete devastation. We had 1,100 trees at that time in the nursery. And when we did all the cut off the dead stuff and restart, because the root stock were still there, but we had to regraft it. We had to start over from scratch. There was 99 trees that hadn't been eaten to below the graft.
You created another buffet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was, I mean, that's the journey. There will be up and downs, and that's why we come out with a master class, because it's like, I wish I had somebody there showing me the ups and downs, and so I knew what to expect, because I didn't know. When we bought the farm, to give you an idea, I knew biology, I knew landscape design, I knew nothing about growing trees. I remember asking the real estate agent, what is a rootstock? He had to explain to me basically, how a fruit tree is made. Oh, it's grafted and there's this roots. I didn't know. I had bought 4,000 trees. And they were 12 years old, so they were fully producing and all, but I didn't even know anything about growing fruit trees. I knew landscape plants, but not how to grow in a farm system. So I had to learn everything along the way. And the nursery was one journey. So we did that. We restarted. We regrew, because you have to grow them 1 year. We bud graft in August, the whole nursery, and we had expanded. We had up to 7,000 trees at one point in the nursery. And so we did that, waited 2 years for them to grow. They were ready to transplant. And just as we're ready, instead of transplanting them in the fall, we left them in the nursery because it's easier. By then we learned. So we put poison bait traps so that only a vole can go into the trap and eat the poison bait. And it was like, I don't want to kill, but I don't want to lose the whole nursery again. So we trapped right in the nursery. And that worked. We didn't have voles, but we had a rabbit. And we didn't have much snow that year. So between Christmas and New Year's, I thought, you know what? It's Christmas time. I don't need to go visit the farm and check on things. And between Christmas and New Year's, in about a 2-week span, 1 week after New Year's, I thought, you know what? Okay, a week after I'll go. The rabbit or rabbits had eaten everything, because there's all, it's a young tree, but it's tender, it's lovely. They ate everything down. To them, it was every night they'd go under our shed. In the daytime, they'd hide under the shed, and at night they'd go out, and it was close. It's right behind the shed. So every night they would just feast on these trees. Jeez. And so after that second time, I remember you kind of go, okay, is the universe telling me something that, okay, forget it. Don't this dream about doing it's a certain way, forget about it. And so it was like, okay, I asked my apprentice, because we were splitting the trees half, and it's like, we've put 5 years of work into this, and we're back to almost to zero, because they had to start all over again and regrow them and regraft them. And I said, okay, it's up to you. What do you want to do now? Because I was kind of ready to throw in the towel about that idea and just say, okay, forget it. Sometimes when you're working with somebody, like, Mike, Brian, it helps to be two. It helps to be teamed. It helps to be husband and wife. It helps to... Why? Because there are times when you'd say no, and if they say yes, that's just the boost you need to go, okay. And so he said yes, and fortunately, because I would have stopped then. I mean, I was like, you know what? At that, I've been beat before, but this one hurts. To take your dream and basically have it completely quashed like that. So
not once, but twice.
Yeah, completely destroyed.
Yeah.
So it was basically, now we have to start again, the third time.
Wow.
So we did, fortunately. And then when it was ready, then we actually cut most of the orchard. I mean, the trees were fully producing and all, and we cut it down. And that was a lesson. I remember 2 years later, after we cut it, I was in a course with these guys from France, two best, it's the people that I always refer to when I talk about pruning, and we have a pruning course, because what I learned from them is, it's so, I used to teach about pruning because I had been pruning for years, but I realized there wasn't a great system. Anyway, so during this course, I remember he said, no, in France, we don't tear up orchards. We don't cut down orchards and replant. He says, no, we don't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, we send a crew in to cut the trees, the top, at about whatever the height, but usually they do it at about 1 meter, so 3 feet high, just because it's a comfortable height to do grafting. And so they come in, they cut, and then a 3-man crew comes in, they recut, so you cut about a foot higher than where your final cut will be, so that could dry, but then you can clear the wood out, because it's still a lot of wood. Then they do that, they shred that wood. Then the crew comes in, one makes the final cut to the space, and the second one cuts the scions, opens, grafts, and the third one tapes and putties the trees. And a 3-man crew will do a hectare, which is 2.5 acres a day. And I thought, I just cut the whole orchard 2 years ago, and now you're telling me that I could have over-grafted? Now, we do a different system. We're no longer in a monoculture apple orchard, but I could have kept a third of the trees, which would have worked out to every third tree could have been an apple tree. I could have kept those and just regrafted. So it's these kind of lessons where it's like, what? You know how much that would have saved me in time and money? And I would have taken a root that was, at that time, it was 20, 25 years old. Mm-hmm. And my tree would have taken off like really well, instead of planting a little tree with a little root. And anyway, you learn your lessons along the way. But finally we did 15 years ago. This fall was 15 years since we replanted. So we started to replant, and we'd replant a block a year. Even the last 2 years, we replanted more blocks. So that now we're about half replanted from what we were when we began. But we replant in a couple of very different variations from a monoculture orchard. One, we use what I call a grocery store concept. So, you've gone to a grocery store, you walk down an aisle, and there's 2 rows of shelves, one on each side. Well, I said, okay, almost everybody goes to a grocery store. They know what it's like. They know the experience, and they go through with their cart, and they buy 1 of these and 2 of these and 3 of those, and there it is. You go aisle by aisle. And so I thought, okay, because in the very early years, people would come, because it was a U-pick orchard, and people would come and say, okay, what else do you have? And I thought, I have another kind of apple. No, I got 40 pounds. I'm good with apples right now, but what else do you have? Because I've driven to the orchard, and while I'm here, well, how can I make use of my time? And I was like, I don't have anything. And I realized in the first year of U-Pick, I thought, oh, gee, having just apples is not good enough, because I could sell them more if I had more. So finally, when we cut the orchard, we redesigned it with a grocery store concept. So that is you go down a row or an aisle, and on each side of that aisle, the 2 rows are harvested that day. But in each of those rows, there can be 5, 6, 8 different varieties or cultivars of different fruit trees. So we'll have rows with apple pear, apple plum, pear plum, apple cherry. It doesn't matter. It's varied throughout, and it only matters the harvest date. So we take a month, we divide it in 3 10-day windows. We have the first 10 days of the month, the middle 10 days of the month, and the last 10 days of the month. And that will give us windows of when people harvest those 2 rows. And I like that. In the monoculture orchard, that was logical. We'd have 4 rows of Empire. Well, when it's time to harvest Empire in the first week of October, we go through and that's what we're harvesting, is those rows. So I like that logic. So how do you have diversity? How do you have variety? How do you put in the permaculture principles, but yet have that commercial logic of how do you do this with that kind of diversity? And so that was the grocery store concept, and integrating the second major concept, which is no longer one tree, one empire, a second empire, third empire, and 110 trees down a row. Now it's a trio. And that's our planting block. That's our planting unit. It's not one tree, it's 3 trees. So we have one tree that's a nitrogen-fixing tree or a nitrogen-fixing shrub. And then we have 2 fruit trees of 2 different species. It could be a fruit tree and a nut tree. It could be a fruit tree, a shrub tree, a nut shrub. It could be 2 nut. It doesn't matter. The trios vary, and that's why now when I teach this, I've taught in New Zealand, in Europe, here in the States, in Canada, and it doesn't matter. It works because you just adapt it to your area. Every area has something. I've worked with people way north of us where, trees, no. There's no trees that grow that far north, but shrubs do. You can still grow fruiting shrubs that are hardy to zone, for you, it would be zone 2. Yeah, it works. Trees, not too much, but shrubs, yes. So it really doesn't matter as long as the trio adapts to what works in your area. So with those 2, that was the basis to replant the orchard. And then the other thing is that's the tree trio. So I call that the horizontal trios. It's 3 trees, but that's not all. So to add to the further diversity in the orchard, and diversity is one of the foundations of permaculture. You want diversity as opposed to monoculture. And I don't blame people who are growing something in a monoculture way. I was there. I know what it's like. And I say to people, look, if you're profitable, the way you're doing it, I don't care if it's organic, conventional, whatever way you're growing, if it's profitable, and I consider profitable without subsidies. Subsidies are terrible. It's terrible. It hides, our shortcomings. So if you find you're profitable without subsidies, continue what you're doing, because it's long enough to get there. Then if you want to try something like this, do it in a separate block. Do it in a separate area. Do it on another farm if you have. Do it somewhere else. Try it. Ideally, and I was talking with somebody here at the show, they want to add it. I said, well, if you have the opportunity, if you're renovating blocks and you can put a permaculture orchard, diverse planting, put it in the middle of your monoculture organic planting, because it will act as a refuge. You're not spraying insecticide here. You're not killing things. So you're going to have your predator populations, like a wildlife refuge, basically, that they will go from there and they will spread to your surrounding blocks, which is a huge service. And that's kind of my biology side, is I understand the predator-prey cycle. I understand how, the ecological systems work. And as long as we don't screw them up, they work really well. But we screw them up. You do one spray, oh, I can't, this insect, spray. Well, what did you spray? You sprayed that insect. Yeah, that was the problem. No, it's not the problem. It's pointing you to a problem, but you want to get rid of it now. I understand that. And so you spray that, but you also kill all its predators. And it always takes way longer for a predator population to rebuild than the prey, which is the pest. And so you're going to be constantly on this cycle. Oh, the pest is bad again. Yeah, because you knocked down your predators last time. So it's always that, well, I can't change this way because you feel like they're going to destroy my crop. Maybe they will this year. I admit it. I've had years. Look, I had thousands of trees, and I remember buying apples. Like that's when I remember that year. I was like, this is bad. I mean, talk about this crop failure. This was a complete failure. We made juice out of them, and I sell, to our members, and I'd say, look, I guarantee you there's bug juice in this apple juice. I guarantee it. But I'll admit it, and I'll tell you. Nobody else will tell you, because if they pick up ground fruit, there's all kinds of insects on the fruit. Doesn't matter you wash. They get into crevices. It doesn't matter. You're squishing them, and you're going to get it, but they won't tell you. So yeah, that's that part of the journey. I went off on a tangent. You said rabbit hole, eh?
Yeah, I love it. But going back to the when you bought the orchard, was that an area where there were a lot of other orchards that were just watching what you were doing and thinking, this guy's nuts, or were you kind of on your own?
Yeah, we were really on our own. The closest orchard is around 20 miles away. Because there was another nut who put an orchard there. It was kind of, I bought from his son, and the original guy who set it up, he noticed one thing, because he had been growing sweet corn in that area, and he noticed a phenomenon that he thought, this is weird. There's almost never hail here. And if you're a fruit grower, hail can be absolutely devastating. And so in the 30 years that we've had the farm, we've had 3 hailstorms, one that was like almost nothing, and 2 that were significant. So 1 every 10 years, when we know most years the actual apple growing areas in our region will get 2 hailstorms a season. Jeez. Often enough.
Oh, wow.
So that phenomenon that he observed, he
just noticed that because of raising sweet corn.
Well, because he was farming that area for many years, and it's like, you know what? We don't get hail here because we're close to it's the St. Lawrence River enlarges in places. The St. Lawrence is a big river. It's a mile, 2 miles across in most places, and where it widens, it goes to like 4 or 5 miles across. So yeah, it's big. It's a big body of water, and that's enough to temper that when primarily from the west, the hailstorms come in, there's enough warming from the lake that it takes the bite off the hail, basically.
Okay.
And so it falls as a heavy rain, let's say. But you think, that cloud is dark, but it's not hail. And so if it builds up further downwind, it will turn into hail. So anyway, it was you got to observe. I remember the first hailstorm we did have was the same year we had a killing frost that spring. We had 0 crop. It hit -8 Celsius, which is about 20 degrees. 20 degrees in full bloom is
really devastating.
Yeah, everything. So it was just at the time the apple were not yet open, but the cherry, the plums, and pears were all in different stages of just being full. All that got wiped out. We maybe had like a bushel of apples at the very top of the tallest trees. The frost was so hard that anything below 12 feet got absolutely devastated. So that year when we got the big hail, I remember it was like we could hear something coming. You could hear hail coming. I mean, you just hear it. And I was like, what's that? We'd never heard that before. And boy, then it started to hit the roof, and we saw it bouncing on the grass. I mean, when hail bounces 6 or 12 inches, it's got some momentum. So it was like, wow, that's massive hail. But it was like, okay, if the year to get it is when we have no crop, that's great. So what do? We went outside, we gathered these, it was ice cubes. It was like the size of ping pong balls. So we gathered them up, put them in a pitcher, made a big pot of iced tea, sat out, and just looked at the ice melting everywhere. Because it made an absolute, there was a layer of ice on the grass everywhere. And this was probably early June. So after flowers. And so I was like, okay, that was kind of a lesson to me. If life gives you, ice, then make iced tea. Because there will be days like that. If you farm long enough, you're going to hit days where it's like, it's devastation. And that's the way it is. And I realized the farm has been great lesson, and it's been a great character builder. I used to be very impatient. It was like, no, I can do this. I wanted to go. But I would not be patient with people or with things or situations. And the farm really calmed me down, really set me to go, you know what? There's a whole bunch of things that are out of your control. You can't do anything about them. What's going to be your attitude when this storm passes? Like, are you going to just cry about it? It won't change anything. You can have a cry. Go ahead if it makes you feel better in the moment. But now stop, sit down, and rethink. And sometimes a disaster is, somebody had a great quote, and I love that. They said, don't waste a good disaster. It was like, that's so true. You have it's a disaster. Well, don't waste it. Why? Because now it might give you a chance to reset. It might give you a chance to change your plans. You were on a certain course, and you realize now that it's a disaster, and maybe this is the year to change. So we had, what year was it? Some years ago, we also had another crop failure. We've had a few, but this was another one. There was no crop or almost no crop. And I thought, okay, you know what? Now is a great chance to go back to our original way of marketing, which was membership marketing. You have Costco's here. Mm-hmm. So Costco runs on a membership. You join as a member, and then you go in and buy. I thought, that sounds good. You get a yearly membership. So in the spring, we'll send out an email to everybody on our email list, and usually we trim it to 2,000 people. And we'll say, okay, membership open. First, we send it to people who were members the year before. They get first dibs. If they don't sign up, then a few days later, we send it to everybody else. And we have only so many spots available. Depending on the crop, usually I have to wait till after flowering to get an idea of what the crop is shaping up to be. And I say, okay, this year we're good for 50 families, or this year we're good for 80 families, whatever it is. And so that's how we market. So we change supply demand. We are in control of supply demand. If the supply is low, then we can't allow many members. And sometimes we never even send the mailing out, because the members from last year, we get enough of them reply and say, hey, are you going to take members this year? And I say, yep, you want it? Yep. And okay, we can only have 25 families because we have almost no crop. And I really want to set people up when they come, they experience abundance. So if the abundance is not there, but when they come, and I find many of our members come from an hour away from Montreal. So it's a travel, we're 1 hour southwest, close to the New York State border. But if they come an hour and they get there, and, oh, sorry, I have nothing left, they won't come back many times. So that's how I balance supply demand. We tried in the early years to be open to the public, and that was a disaster, because there would be people go through and they'd come back and I'm like, your bag is empty. Yeah, because we saw some of the apples have defects. I'm like, okay, you're not the customer I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, if you're open to everybody, then you have no screening way. You have no way to filter. And I love being a price maker, not a price taker. Mm-hmm. I don't want to take the price that this is the price, take it or leave it. No, you don't have to be, or in many cases you don't have to be. I'm not in the best range for a membership marketing model to work. I'm beyond the half hour to 30,000 people. We're out a ways from enough people to support the farm, but because of all our outreach and YouTube and social media, we do get enough people to make it work. So
Are you able to use the other, when you talk about bringing people to the farm and they see abundance, are you also, are the customers you're working with able to be taught the other side too, that you've talked about, like the crop failures and, through the, if you know that something happened, say a hailstorm came through and you're communicating out with them and it's just saying, here's what happened. This is farming.
And that's exactly what I try to convey. If it's, you know what, and even I pre-programmed them. So I knew this year we had record. I mean, it was record abundance. It was crazy. Well, the last 2 emails, I say, I was giving away, we gave over 4 tons of free fruit. Like, look, come pick, because we got too much. When I have a problem of too much, I give it away for free. Because when they come for the apples, hey, look at all the pears you have. Yep, pears, $3 a pound. Oh, look at all the plums. Yep, plums, $4 a pound. Apples, $1.50. So it's the same as stores. What do stores do? Lost leaders, right? Well, for me, it's not even a lost leader. It's great because if they pick it, even if it's free, then they're happy. I still get a membership, and on top of it, I don't have to be concerned about what am I going to do with all that crop. I don't even have to take it to make juice. I don't have to make vinegar. I don't have to transform that crop. And so because it was so much this year, I already pre-programmed them that next year won't be as abundant. I know that because the trees can only give you so much. And when they give a record, the next year will not be an equal record. It's just, it's not.
We have about a 3-acre orchard on a farm that I rent, and I've never seen apples, and it's not maintained greatly, but I'm guessing probably 30 trees either snapped off or broke limbs off. The deer loved it, but I have never seen an apple crop like that this year.
Yep.
So you're saying next year is definitely not going to be the same?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Because a tree, think of it, it's like us. You have 100% energy. So the tree goes in, and it will always prioritize its energy first to reproduction. Absolute primary directive for every plant, multiply. Why? Because you don't know. Are you going to die? Is the deer going to come and eat? Are the rabbits going to girdle me? You don't know what will happen. So this year's priority right now for a plant is produce the most seeds you can. And so in a big year, what happens is the fruit is smaller. The tree doesn't care. It's actually better because if you have smaller fruit, you have more of them. Because a tree will produce, let's say, 200 pounds. Well, it could be 200 pounds of 1/4 pound apples or 200 pounds of 1/8 pounds apples. Well, you're going to have a lot more apples when they're 1/8 of a pound. And so that's what happens. So they prioritize that. They want to get that crop ripened and fall and seeds dispersed. Next year, you know what? If I have any energy left, I'll flower and I'll produce fruit. You always benefit in fruit situation, in orchard, all tree crops. You always are working on last year's work. You're benefiting from last year's work. So this year was incredible. We did a great job last year. We harvested the good work of last year, and we had very beneficial weather. We had an absolutely dry spring. We had 1 rain in May, June. Only 1 rain.
Oh, wow.
So when the snow melted, the trees had to carry just with the snow melt for about a month. They got 1 rain, and then they had to carry another month. We irrigate, so they get that added. But there was no extra water. So the irrigation is just a drip in one spot, then the tree has to make do with what you get there. That's it. But then we had July, August, very wet. So the fruit just filled, and like in the spring I was concerned, like, it doesn't look like a lot. But boy, when they started to fill with the rain, it turned out, as you say, we had the most branch and trees broken this year ever. But it's so much of a crop. Now what happens is you're harvesting next year what happened this year. So the trees prioritize putting out those fruit. So the flower buds for next year, they're secondary. They're not primary focus. There's not extra energy on a branch or around that, because usually it's in a handful distance from that spur or branch. That's where it's collecting energy for that flower bud for next year. There's no extra energy. I didn't spray anything this year. I haven't fertilized in 15 years. So there's not like, I could supplement that. I could come in and, give the trees everything they could need to give me a better harvest next year. But even if I did that, I would not get a harvest like I did this year. Chances are very low, unless there are some growers who are so on top of it. They're maybe foliar feeding every 2 days at critical times, and you could make up for the deficit. But I'm like, you know what? I like to say nothing beats easy. Mm-hmm. I want trees that I don't have to spray, that even if I don't fertilize, they'll give me a good crop, even if it's 1 year out of 2, because some will alternate. Actually, that alternate is set up from when I had that complete failure. Everything froze. Well, the year after we had a big year, and every year since, it's hard to get that back to producing every year. Yeah.
Do you have grapes in the mix?
Yeah. We have apple, pear, plum, cherry in the tree fruit. Then we have grape, kiwi, climbing the nitrogen fixers. So the part of the trio, which is the trees, so it could be honey locust, black locust, Russian olive. There's a few others. And we put the grape and kiwi at the base of those trees, and they use those trees as their wire trellis or frame to climb up. They use the branches. They use trees. And the big advantage of that, and that's where observation, which is a first principle of permaculture, I like to walk in the extremes. Anytime we have extreme weather or an extreme day or an extreme night or morning, whatever, I'm out. I want to be out there. I want to watch. I want to see what is happening. You could walk on a nice day. You're not going to learn a whole lot usually. But walk, if you're going to maximize the effectiveness of your walk on your property, walk the horrible days. Walk when it's the biggest rain of the year. Walk when it's the coldest day of the year. Walk when it's the first and last frost of the year. There you'll learn. For example, walking like that, I walked around on a heavy frost, first heavy frost. A kiwi plant on a post 6 feet away or 8 feet away from the tree, completely burned. I mean, all the leaves frost. Kiwi is frost sensitive. Everything, you're just left with the vine. 6 feet away on the honey locust, no leaves frosted. Like, whoa, what happened? Well, if the tree's big enough, like we have honey locusts now that are 8 inches diameter, that's a mass. Like there is a mass of heat held in that tree trunk that is not held in wire. And so the tree actually often, the kiwi often wraps around the tree as it goes up. So on that cold night, the tree heat in the trunk of the tree is enough to keep that kiwi from freezing. It was like, wow. 6 feet away. I mean, there and here that one's frosted. This one's nothing. The trees have a little microclimate every one creates. Anyway. Yeah, so we have that. We have a whole range underneath. So we have trees. That's the horizontal trio. So our fruit trees, nut shrubs, nut trees, nitrogen fixer. That's the tree trios. Then we have vertical trios. So we have trees, shrubs, fruiting shrubs, and perennials. And perennials, there's the whole range, but herbs and perennial vegetables and flowers. And in the early years, it was annual vegetables. If you're doing annual vegetables, one lesson I learned is don't put 1,200 feet row of zucchini unless you have a massive market. I mean, yeah, that's...
One plant will feed 5 families.
And 1,200 of them will overwhelm even your flock of chickens when they see us coming as like, Oh God, not more zucchini. The dog didn't even want to play with them anymore. Yeah. So yeah, you learn lessons along the way, but it did.
So
Sorry.
this is in a row. I'm just trying to picture this in my head. You got the trio of trees, and then the trio of bushes, and then the trio including a perennial
Right.
in each in a row.
The idea is we have one tree in the middle. On each side of them, two fruiting shrubs. That's the model we're using. So it could be black currant, red currant, gooseberry, hascap berry, raspberry, rhubarb. Those are kind of what we consider shrubs. Rhubarb technically isn't a shrub, but it's a volume. It takes 3 feet wide, 2 feet high. That's a volume that's like a shrub. Could be blueberries. So that's what we put as tree shrub. And then on each side of these trees, we'll have, depending on the spacing, but we try to put one plant every foot. So if this tree is spaced 10 feet, then we'll have 10 plants on this side and 10 plants on the other side. And these go from chives, garlic chives, Egyptian onions, wild garlic, then you get sea kale and daylily and
All perennials?
all perennial. Now all perennial.
Now
In
all
the early years, it was mostly all annuals because the trees were little. You know, if you have a 3-foot tree, that's not a lot of shade, so you can grow anything. For first 3 years, that's where, man, zucchini grew like crazy because it helps. Having trees gives them a bit of windbreak, and all the big-leafed plants. Squash, my God, we had to be careful because if squash got a hold of the tree, it would actually bend the tree over because, squash wants to climb. So we had to go around and keep cutting squash off the trees because you plant the squash or pumpkin, whatever, and it starts to spread everywhere. And then it starts to want to climb anything it could get a hold of. So we had to keep cutting them off. Climbing beans, we learned you don't put climbing beans near a fruit tree, because we'd get so many pods of beans. They love a stake. You put a trellis, you put something to climb. They'd climb up the fruit tree, and because the trees were small. So even a 4-foot tree, when the bean is up to the top and still wants to go, and it starts forming, like we'd have branches with 6, 7, 8 pods on a branch on these. The climbing beans is the main stem, and then it forms side branches. But they did so well. When you get 6, 7 pods on each branch, and usually you get a branch at each node of the vine, it would make so much weight of pods that the tree would bend over in half. Then we had to retrain that tree because it was completely bent over. And if it stays bent for long enough, then when the beans are gone, the tree doesn't bounce back. So that's the training of trees. So many things we learned, but putting those principles in place, having grocery store concept, having trios, that was such a change. I remember after the second 3-year cycle of caterpillars, and that's where there's a time to talk about your idea, and there's a time to be quiet with your idea. I'm in the time to talk about the idea. But I went through a phase for 5 years where I said nothing. I mean, we had this orchard. It was diverse. It was starting. It was growing. And I remember no tours, no visitors, no nothing. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure it would work. I mean, it's a crazy thing to plant like this. I had the monoculture orchard. I knew what that's like. But I had no idea. I couldn't go to my second neighbor and say, hey, how does it work if I put a honey locust, a pear, and an apple tree? Like, no. I mean, no. And that was kind of the beginning of internet, too. 2007, 2006, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. So I was pretty well on my own, and I just, you can have an idea. I could vehicle this idea to people listening, and they go, yeah, that's interesting. They said, I've heard of this idea. You hear, but that's not knowing the idea. There is hearing about something, and then there's knowing about it. knowing there's levels of knowing. When you've done something and you've tested it for a few years, now you know. In the beginning, you've heard about it. And people listening, many of them probably just hear about doing this. But they don't know, because that conviction comes with applying it, trying it, doing it, and seeing the results. I tell people that, like pruning, we have all kinds of courses, and one of them is pruningcourse.com. And you really learn how to prune when you've gone through the cycle of the 3-step approach to pruning, and you have pruned the tree for 3 years, and you see the result. Because after 3 years, any new branch that grew, now they are starting to produce. So now you see, when I do it this way, now I get this result, and now this is the production. So when you've done that cycle after 3 years, now you could say, now I know. Before that, you know about, but you don't really know. So there is a difference between just hearing about something. Hearing about it, most times you have to hear about something 7 times. What does advertising do? They try to pound it because you have to hear it at least 7 times to even be aware that, oh yeah, I've heard about it. Now you've heard about it many times. And so I make no bones about it. I talked about it in yesterday's presentation, that my best success story, maybe we can end on that, but a little girl who would come with her parents. And the girl came, when she was in diapers, they would come every year. And every year, so I'd see the little girl growing. And in our area, there's a lot of apple orchards. That's the main crop, and tree fruit. So it's not directly around me, but around Montreal. And so this girl, as she went to elementary school, one of the things to do in September is they go on an outing apple picking. That's pretty common in our area. So the little girl goes apple picking. She comes home, and the mother's all excited. So how did you like your apple picking day? And the little girl looked up to her and said, Mommy, it was weird. There was just apples. And that's where, when I heard that story, I thought, wow. It's going to take 2 generations for the image of what an orchard is to change to a permaculture orchard. Because think of it, where did you hear, if you close your eyes and I say, picture an orchard, you're going to picture a monoculture. And it could be peach orchard, cherry orchard, whatever, depending what your area is. Could be an orange grove. It doesn't matter. But your image is, it's a monoculture. That's what an orchard is. The word is associated with a picture. That little girl had a totally different picture of an orchard. For her, it was normal to walk and have, oh, look, here's the apple tree, and I'm walking one aisle, and here's the pear tree. Oh, look, here's plums, but there's grapes, Mommy, there's grapes. And look, while we're walking, there's rhubarb we could pick, and the raspberries are ready. See what I mean? That, to her, that was normal. And I always encourage people, the members, to come eat. Just eat. You're here, there's nothing better than right off the tree. And so just eat. So the little kids especially, they know, just eat. So they're walking around all the time. The ones who are in diaper, I pity their parents, because, boy, there's going to be something waiting for them in a few hours. But that's the whole point, is just gorge yourself. Just eat and eat. Because there's nothing better than a non-spray. I say beyond organic, because I was organic, and I know this is definitely beyond. We could do this organically. I could do it because I run with members, I don't need the certification. But we could do more. We could move away from monoculture, because it's not a functioning ecosystem. And you could fight against it. You could do all the inputs. It can work profitably, but it will never work as a self-sustaining system that requires almost no work. Our average this year is a half a day per week work.
Jeez. In an orchard.
Yeah. And most of that time was spent in the summer because we had so much rain. Maintaining the aisles was mowing. Because the grass is going crazy. Normally, we're in 40 foot of sand. We're in pure sand. It's a beach. And so normally, July, August, things just don't grow. So we even roller crimp the aisles now because that way we keep them covered. If we mow and the ground shows, that's it. We could have 60, 70 days with zero growth of grass because it's that dry. And so this year it just grew and grew and grew. So just to keep the grass conditioned for the fall harvest, we mowed. And that was much of the work. So
Wow.
Well, you talked about knowing or hearing about,
yeah.
and you're doing and teaching, and this was fascinating. And can you share where people can find you? You talked about a YouTube and
Yeah, the YouTube under Stefan Sobkowiak, the Permaculture Orchard. So it's Sobkowiak, and Stefan is Stefan. We have a master class for all the courses. It's at permaculture.study. Have you Facebook? You'll find me under my name on X, on Instagram. Anyway, wherever it's convenient, sir, take a look. And I do not get to all the comments. I guarantee that because it's gotten that. Yeah, there's no way to keep up, but I try to respond.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, and what you're doing is really, really cool. So thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.